The growing tensions in Ukraine have prompted calls for increased military support from Western allies, with some now advocating for a more direct involvement. As the conflict continues to evolve, the idea of readying Baltic troops for Ukraine is gaining traction. With their proximity to the region and a shared concern over Russian aggression, the Baltic nations are uniquely positioned to contribute to Ukraine's defense efforts. This move could signify a shift in NATO's strategy, signaling not only greater military backing for Ukraine, but also a stronger commitment to deterring further Russian expansion. The potential deployment of Baltic forces raises important questions about the risks, rewards, and long-term implications for regional security. Russian threats cause dangerous choices. At the Lennart-Meri Conference in May 2024, Baltic state representatives warned Germany that they were ready to send troops into Ukraine, citing dissatisfaction with Germany's restrictions on using German weapons on Russian soil. The Baltics believe Germany's cautious approach allows Russia to gain ground in Ukraine, particularly in eastern Kharkiv, which directly threatens their security. They argue that Russia's successes could lead to a broader invasion, including the Baltics. Though no Baltic troops have been deployed to Ukraine yet, reports suggest they may intervene if Ukraine faces significant setbacks due to a lack of Western support. Estonia's Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas, mentioned that parliamentary consent would be needed for Estonian troop deployment, but emphasized that no options should be ruled out. Additionally, the Baltic states have been strengthening their defenses, including a joint resolution to establish a Baltic Common Defense Zone. Estonia plans to build 600 bunkers by 2025, while Latvia aims to double its military by 2032 and reintroduce conscription. Lithuania has agreed to station a 4,800-man brigade on its Russian border by 2027. The Baltics are preparing for potential conflict. NATO involvement. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, having joined NATO in 2004, are protected under Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which commits all NATO members to defend any member attacked by a foreign power. If Russia were to strike the Baltics, NATO would be obligated to respond. However, there is debate about whether NATO would consider Russian attacks justified if the Baltics are seen as aggressors for fighting alongside Ukraine. Russia claims the Baltics triggered the strikes by their involvement in the Ukraine conflict. NATO faces a dilemma: either trigger Article 5 and intervene in the war, or allow Russia to expand its control, further threatening Europe. The Baltics view inaction as an invitation for Russian aggression and are prepared to take action, forcing NATO to either fight with them or risk losing them to Russia. Despite the risks, the Baltics are ready to challenge NATO's response. Why are the Baltic states so anti-Russia? Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia risk Putin's wrath by considering troop deployment in Ukraine because they believe the Western response to Russia's aggression has been insufficient. They fear that if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, it may target the Baltics next. Their history of Soviet occupation, similar to Ukraine's, shapes this fear. After World War II, the Baltics were absorbed into the Soviet Union. Latvia lost its independence in 1940, and the Soviets imposed brutal control, including mass deportations. In the first year of Soviet rule, 35,000 Latvians, mostly intellectuals, were deported, with many thousands more afterward. Estonia and Lithuania share similar histories. Estonia was annexed by the USSR on August 6, 1940, and between 1940 and 1944, 7,450 Estonians died. Soviet mass deportations began before World War II, with 10,200 Estonians sent to Siberian labor camps. The Soviets also conscripted 35,000 Estonians into the military between July and August 1941. These nations, having fought for independence, are determined not to allow Russia to reassert control. As in Latvia, Estonia fell under the Nazi regime during the middle of World War II, and the Soviet Union defeated them, but 70,000 Estonians fled to Sweden and Germany, and 25,000 more were displaced, and 39,000 died. Estonia joined the USSR after World War II, and early Soviet rule devastated its population. In March 1949, the Soviets deported 2,700 Estonians to Siberian labor camps, killing 3,750. Between 1944 and 1951, Stalin imprisoned 3,000 Estonians for political reasons. Resistance emerged through the 15,000-strong Forest Brothers insurgency, which ultimately failed. Estonia gained independence from the USSR faster than Latvia. In 1988, 25,000 Estonians protested for independence, and by August 20, 1991, Estonia officially declared independence, just one day before Latvia. Lithuania shares a similar history, having been independent from Russia for 20 years before the Soviet invasion in June 1940. The 1939 German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact divided the Baltic region, with Nazi territory extending to Lithuania's northern border. Like Latvia and Estonia, Lithuania experienced massive deportations during the first 2 years of Soviet rule, with 35,000 Lithuanians expelled before Germany's attack. After Nazi occupation, Lithuania saw guerrilla resistance through the 1940s and early 1950s, with around 4,000 people fighting against Russification and repression. Russia's massive deportations cut off large parts of the opposition until Lithuania was compelled to adopt Soviet systems. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, 22,000 Lithuanians were deported between 1947 and 1949. Many were deported to Siberian and other Soviet work camps. Like Latvia, the Soviet Union collectivized agriculture in Lithuania despite underground resistance. In the 1970s, Lithuania produced more samizdat than any other Soviet republic, reflecting its desire for independence. In 1990, Lithuania's elections led to a declaration of independence, and the Soviets attempted to overthrow the government in January 1991. However, Lithuania gained independence in August 1991 after the failed coup, following the example of Estonia and Latvia. The Baltic nations' history of suffering under Russian rule and their struggles for independence shaped their current fears. They believe they will be the next target if Putin wins in Ukraine. Putin has expressed intentions to restore territories to Russia, including Ukraine, which he considers historically Russian, and likely views the Baltics similarly. All three Baltic states were part of the Soviet Union from 1940 to 1990 and were under Russian control before 1917. The Baltics have witnessed increasing Russian aggression in recent decades, from the 2014 Crimea annexation to the 2008 Russo-Georgian conflict, Europe's first 21st-century war. The weak international response to Russia's actions raised alarms for the Baltics, warning them that Europe may not take Putin's aggression seriously again. This, combined with direct threats from Russia, is prompting the Baltics to consider sending troops into Ukraine. Politico reported a Russian draft directive on May 22, 2024, days before Baltic nations discussed this move at the Lennart Meri conference. NATO membership for Sweden and Finland threatens Baltics. Though the Russian directive aiming to redefine Baltic Sea borders is now rescinded, it highlighted Russia's attempt to seize sea territory currently governed by Finland and Lithuania. Lithuania's Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis warned that Russia's actions are provocations designed to intimidate neighboring countries. This escalation emphasizes Russia's aggressive, revisionist stance, posing a threat to both the Baltics and Europe, and serves as a wake-up call to the international community. The potential NATO membership of Sweden and Finland adds to these concerns. While it strengthens NATO, Putin views this as a threat, as it opens the Baltic Sea to NATO forces. Russia's only year-round Baltic port is in Kaliningrad, and NATO expansion increases pressure on Russia's strategic position. Some see the Baltic Sea as becoming a NATO lake, improving defense capabilities against Russian aggression. This could provoke a more aggressive Russian response toward the Baltic states, who warn that NATO must be prepared to counter it. The Baltics have been key supporters of Ukraine, ranking in the top 5 for military aid as a percentage of GDP. Latvia donated 1.5%, while Estonia and Lithuania each contributed 1.8%. Lithuania has committed to continuous support for Ukraine until 2026. The Baltic states regard these payments as defense reinforcements. De-Russification campaigns are also coordinated. A new law in Latvia would eliminate Russian language instruction in public schools by 2025. Lithuania revoked residency permits from 135 Russians it considered security concerns in July 2023. Estonia also banned Russians from crossing its border earlier in the Ukraine war. All three convey the message. They oppose the conflict and are striving to eliminate Russian influence after the Soviet Union's fall. Direct military support is possible, although none of the Baltic states are powerful, especially compared to Russia. Global Firepower's 2024 rankings of 145 military states place them in the bottom half. The Baltics' best finish is Estonia's 87 out of 145, but they'd still be valuable in battle. Latvia, the lowest ranked of the three at 99, has 6,750 military personnel, 17,250 of whom are active. The rest are reserves and 12,500 paramilitary members. Latvia has 1,544 vehicles, but no tanks for Ukraine. It might potentially provoke Ukraine with 59 self-propelled artillery batteries and 6 mine warfare vessels in the Baltic Sea. A modest army, especially given who Latvia will battle, but Lithuania and Estonia will support it. Lithuania could send more of its 14,150 soldiers to Ukraine, according to GFP. However, only 23,000 are active military. It can call on 24,000 reservists and 14,150 paramilitary troops. Like Latvia, it lacks tanks, but can send 1,300 vehicles to battle. Add 21 self-propelled and 54 towed artillery pieces, and you have decent ground combat equipment. Lithuania's 11-ship navy is small, like Latvia's. 4 of those are mine warfare ships, so it may work with Latvia to make the Baltic Sea more dangerous for Russian ships. Lithuania could potentially send a few helicopters and fixed transporters to fight. Finally, GFP ranks Estonia as the strongest of the three. 7,700 of Estonia's 96,500 military troops are active. 6 rocket artillery and 24 self-propelled artillery battalions join the fight. Ukraine's forces could gain 14 9 vehicles. Estonia's small navy and a few helicopters and fixed-wing carriers could also help. The Baltic Sea could get 4 more mine warfare ships. These numbers suggest that none of the Baltic nations are powerhouses, but that may not matter. Since they were all Soviet, the 3 states will feel a connection to Ukraine. Putin will threaten them, and they may think they're next if Ukraine falls. So they'd enter the battle to support Ukraine and defend themselves. They might expand the war's front lines to their borders, spreading Russia's forces thin, and use their warships to force Russia to spend Baltic Sea resources. NATO is another issue. Would the Baltic states entering Ukraine signal NATO, especially its European states, to intervene? Perhaps the Baltic states want that. All 3 will know their military can't threaten Russia without Western help. They may enter Ukraine to illustrate how flimsy the Baltic barrier between Russia and Europe is, prompting NATO to intervene to stop Russia. The Baltic republics' bold decision protects their future and puts NATO at a historic crossroads. Sending soldiers to Ukraine might escalate tensions and test NATO's resolve to defend its partners. Will the West support the Baltic states against the dangers or struggle to balance national interests with alliance obligations? The situation is more tense than ever, and we must wait to see how the following developments will impact European politics.